Finn Henry, a boy, admired for his intelligence, trusted by his family, and loved by his community, hid a darkness so chilling that it would make him the most evil son in UK history. Finn Henry was born in a quiet, seemingly peaceful town in the United Kingdom, a place where everyone knew everyone, and nothing much ever happened. From the outside, the Henry family looked perfect. His father, a highly respected lawyer, was known for his intelligence and calm demeanor, while his mother, a devoted schoolteacher, was admired for her patience and kindness. Their home was always neat and welcoming, with freshly mowed lawns and tidy flower beds. Friends and neighbors often praised the Henrys for raising their only son so well, describing Finn as polite, well-mannered, and unusually thoughtful for his age. On the surface, it was the kind of childhood many parents would envy, a life free of obvious trouble or worry. But behind closed doors, the picture was far from perfect. Subtle tensions and oddities began to emerge almost from the start. Finn, even as a small child, displayed behaviors that unsettled those who noticed them closely. While other children were content to play games or explore nature, Finn seemed fascinated by control and secrecy. Small, seemingly harmless incidents, like the time a neighborhood cat disappeared and was later found, injured, were dismissed by adults as simple accidents or the quirks of a curious child. Yet these early actions hinted at something darker, a pattern that nobody fully understood. His parents, absorbed in their careers and daily routines, often overlooked warning signs, interpreting Finn's peculiar interests as harmless eccentricity. As he grew, Finn's charm became his most powerful tool. At school, he was the student teachers loved, intelligent, obedient, and articulate beyond his years. He could answer any question with precision, always attentive, always polite. Yet outside the classroom, his curiosity took strange and unsettling directions. He began collecting unusual objects, carefully arranging them in secret drawers or hidden corners of his room. These were not ordinary childhood collections. Old knives, photographs of strangers, and journals filled with detailed accounts of imagined events hinted at a mind preoccupied with power and control. He kept meticulous records of his thoughts and actions, though his parents remained unaware, believing he was simply disciplined and organized. Neighbors occasionally noticed Finn's oddities. Some recalled the unsettling calm in his eyes, a detachment that made them uneasy. He rarely played with other children, and often watched them with a quiet intensity that seemed to analyze rather than enjoy. Even small lies, innocent on the surface, carried an underlying purpose and precision, a subtle manipulation designed to see how others would react. Adults were puzzled but inclined to excuse his behavior, assuming it was just part of growing up. Nobody could have predicted the darkness these early signs foreshadowed. The more time passed, the more the cracks in the family's perfect image began to show, though they were invisible to outsiders. Finn's fascination with control and secrecy became more pronounced, shaping his thoughts and actions in ways his parents could not foresee. He learned early on that appearances could be deceiving, that charm and obedience could mask troubling impulses. By the time he reached the brink of adolescence, these early inclinations had grown into a quiet obsession, a hidden side of him that was entirely separate from the polite, intelligent boy everyone saw. The town continued to admire the Henry family, completely unaware that within their home, a darkness was quietly taking root, waiting for the moment it could emerge. As Finn Henry entered his early teenage years, the subtle peculiarities of his childhood began to take on a more disturbing and calculated form. He had grown taller, more confident, and outwardly charming, but beneath the surface, a quiet obsession with control and power had begun to dominate his thoughts. At school, he maintained the image of the perfect student. Teachers admired his intelligence and attentiveness. Classmates were drawn to his polite demeanor, and parents in the neighborhood saw him as a model of good upbringing. Yet behind closed doors, Finn was meticulously crafting a private world that few could imagine. His bedroom had become a sanctuary for his growing fascination with the darker side of human nature. Every item he collected was deliberate, a piece of a puzzle only he could understand. Old knives with worn handles, photographs of strangers, and notebooks filled with detailed observations of people he encountered were all carefully catalogued. It was not mere curiosity. It was obsession. He analyzed patterns, studied behavior, and documented even minor reactions to see how people could be influenced or manipulated. His fascination with control was not just a passing phase. It had become an essential part of who he was. Socially, Finn perfected the art of concealment. He became a master at presenting one face to the world while keeping his true impulses hidden. In public, he was the polite, intelligent, and trustworthy teenager everyone expected him to be. In private, he allowed himself the freedom to explore thoughts and actions that were calculated, methodical, and unsettling. He would spend hours alone, disappearing into his own mind, planning, imagining, and testing ideas without ever leaving a trace of his intentions. His parents noticed his isolation, but dismissed it as a sign of a focused, studious child. To them, Finn's solitude was simply part of his disciplined nature, nothing more. During this time, Finn began to experiment with minor acts that gave him a sense of power. He would manipulate small situations at school to his advantage, orchestrating events so that others would unknowingly follow his direction. It was never about getting caught. The thrill came from seeing the invisible strings he could pull, the silent control he could exert without anyone realizing it. Even small pranks or minor deceptions carried a precision that set him apart from ordinary mischief. Each success reinforced his belief that he was superior, capable of thinking, acting in ways others could not comprehend. Neighbors and family friends sometimes noticed hints of his strange behavior. They spoke in hushed tones about the eerie calm in his eyes or the unsettling intensity with which he observed the world. Some were disturbed, but most were reassured by his outward charm and intelligence. Finn understood this well. He had learned that people rarely look beyond appearances. He had discovered the power of secrecy and the advantage of hiding his true self behind a mask of normalcy. By the time Finn reached mid-adolescence, the obsession that had quietly grown during his childhood had become an all-consuming force. He no longer acted impulsively. Every action was deliberate, every thought a step toward a larger, hidden plan. A combination of intelligence, charm, and a growing fascination with manipulation made him increasingly dangerous. Nobody could have guessed that beneath the polite exterior, a mind was developing that would one day commit acts of unimaginable cruelty. In his world, control was everything, and Finn Henry was learning how to wield it with precision, patience, and ruthless determination, setting the stage for the crimes that would soon shock the nation. By the time Finn Henry reached his later teenage years, the carefully constructed mask of charm and obedience he wore for the world had become a tool for far darker purposes. The quiet town that had once admired the Henry family for their politeness and success was about to witness an event that would shatter the illusion of innocence forever. The first crime was subtle, almost invisible at first, but it marked the beginning of a chilling pattern that would come to define Finn's life. It started with the disappearance of a neighbor's beloved pet. The animal had been a small dog, friendly and well-loved by the entire block. One morning, it was simply gone. Finn had been seen lingering near the neighbor's garden the day before, ostensibly watching the flowers grow or reading a book under a tree. No one thought to suspect him. Hours later, the dog was found dead in a secluded part of the nearby woods. And though the circumstances were mysterious, there was no direct evidence pointing to any individual. Authorities assumed it was a tragic accident, and the case was quietly closed. Finn's parents expressed shock and sorrow like everyone else, but beneath their grief, Finn felt a growing thrill. He had orchestrated the entire event with precision, learning for the first time the intoxicating power of being able to act without consequence. The act itself was revealing. Finn's attention to detail was extraordinary. There were no fingerprints, no stray hairs, nothing that could be traced back to him. He had studied the environment for days, noting when neighbors left for work, when the streets were quiet, and how easily an incident could be made to look accidental. It was not just a crime. It was a demonstration of skill and foresight, an exercise in patience and control. The exhilaration he felt at successfully executing it would haunt him for the rest of his life, fueling a compulsion that would escalate with terrifying speed. After the incident, Finn returned to his normal routines as if nothing had happened. He attended school, helped his parents around the house, and continued to be the polite, well-behaved son everyone admired. This duality, the ability to perform kindness and cruelty almost simultaneously, became a hallmark of his personality. It made him unpredictable, dangerous, and almost impossible to detect. People were charmed by him. They trusted him implicitly. That trust would be his greatest weapon in the years to come. Even as the town tried to move past the mysterious death, a few subtle signs hinted that something was deeply wrong. Friends of the family noted the quiet intensity in Finn's eyes, the way he seemed to observe everything with an almost clinical precision. Small lies became tools, minor manipulations became games, and each successful act of deception strengthened his sense of superiority. It was clear that Finn was not just a troubled teenager. He was someone learning how to manipulate the world with methodical care. The first crime was only the beginning, but it set the tone for everything that followed. Finn's fascination with control had moved from thought into action, and he discovered the intoxicating thrill of secrecy, the power of acting without accountability. For the quiet town, it was a mystery easily dismissed. For Finn, it was the opening act of a life that would soon be defined by manipulation, cruelty, and an ever-growing obsession with the darkness lurking within him. By the end of that first crime, one thing was certain. The boy everyone thought they knew was only the beginning of something far more sinister. As Finn Henry moved deeper into his teenage years, the contrast between his public persona and private life became more pronounced. To the outside world, he was the model teenager, polite, intelligent, and unremarkable in a way that made him almost invisible. Teachers praised his work ethic, neighbors admired his manners, and even his parents felt proud of the calm, composed young man their son appeared to be. But behind the locked doors of his bedroom, Finn was constructing a secret world that grew darker and more obsessive with every passing day. His room had become a private sanctuary for his hidden impulses. Shelves were lined with carefully arranged notebooks, each page filled with detailed observations about people he encountered, friends, neighbors, strangers on the street. He cataloged their habits, weaknesses, and fears, as though he were preparing for a complex experiment in control. In drawers and hidden compartments, he kept objects of fascination, old knives, tools, photographs of people he didn't know, and scraps of articles detailing crimes from around the country. Every item, every note, was meticulously organized, and every action was deliberate. It was no longer simple curiosity. It was an obsession with understanding power, fear, and manipulation. Finn spent hours alone, disappearing for long stretches of time without explanation. He would retreat into his thoughts, planning and imagining scenarios that no one would suspect. In these moments, he was completely absorbed in the mechanics of control, how to influence, how to intimidate, how to stay invisible while orchestrating events. The thrill came not from recognition or reward, but from the knowledge that he could act without detection, that he could bend circumstances to his will without anyone suspecting a thing. His parents began to notice his increasing isolation, but they interpreted it as the behavior of a focused, studious child rather than the warning signs it truly was. Friends who tried to reach out were subtly pushed away, often without realizing it. Finn's ability to manipulate those around him extended even to his family, who believed they understood him completely. In truth, they had no idea who Finn really was. His calm demeanor, polite conversation, and occasional displays of affection were carefully calculated to maintain the illusion of normalcy. As his secret world expanded, so did his fascination with cruelty. He began small experiments, testing reactions and boundaries. A dead animal left in a hidden corner, a minor act of deception that caused anxiety or fear. Each act was recorded and analyzed in his notebooks. For Finn, the reactions of others were the most valuable part, the proof that he could manipulate reality itself without ever being caught. The line between fantasy and action grew thinner, and his imagination became a blueprint for more significant acts to come. By the time he reached the cusp of adulthood, Finn had mastered the art of duality. He could present the perfect image to the world while indulging in obsessions and dark thoughts in complete secrecy. He had learned the power of invisibility, the thrill of deception, and the intoxicating sense of control over others. What the town saw a polite, intelligent, and reserved young man was only the surface. Beneath it, a mind was growing colder, sharper, and more calculated, preparing for the crimes that would one day shock everyone who had ever trusted him. In his private world, Finn Henry was no longer a boy. He was a master of manipulation, a silent predator, and a carefully concealed threat, waiting for the right moment to strike. The quiet town had never experienced anything like the disappearance of the local shopkeeper, and it marked a chilling escalation in Finn Henry's dark obsession. To outsiders, the event seemed random, an unfortunate tragedy, but in reality, it was a carefully orchestrated act of manipulation and control. The shopkeeper, a middle-aged man well liked by the community, vanished one morning without a trace. His store was left unlocked, shelves in slight disarray, and a sense of unease settled over the neighborhood. No one could imagine that Finn, a polite and intelligent teenager they all trusted, was at the center of it. Finn had studied the shopkeeper for weeks, learning his daily routines, observing when he left for errands, and noting the times the streets were least crowded. Every detail was logged in one of his meticulously maintained notebooks. He understood the environment as if he had mapped it entirely in his mind, the back alleys, the hidden paths, the times when no one would be watching. Unlike his earlier acts, which had involved small, almost symbolic demonstrations of control, this plan required careful timing and an understanding of human behavior on a larger scale. He was patient, waiting for the perfect moment to strike without leaving a trace. The day the shopkeeper disappeared, Finn executed his plan with the precision of someone who had rehearsed every step 1,000 times in his mind. He made sure that no one noticed him near the store, blending seamlessly into the background as though he were just another passerby. Once the opportunity presented itself, he moved quickly, unseen and unheard, guiding events so that the man vanished without a struggle or a clue. Hours later, the town began to panic, but investigators were baffled. There were no signs of forced entry, no clear motive, and no evidence pointing to any suspect. Finn's careful preparation had ensured that he remained invisible, untouchable, and entirely unsuspected. As the investigation unfolded, subtle patterns began to emerge, though no one yet connected them to Finn. Finn observed the chaos with quiet satisfaction, documenting every news article, every police report, and every frightened conversation in his private notebooks. Yet Finn's parents remained blind to his involvement, trusting the polite, obedient son they had raised. He continued to maintain his facade flawlessly, helping around the house, studying, and speaking with the same charm and precision he always had. Behind this veneer, however, his mind was consumed with planning, analyzing, and imagining what would come next. The incident demonstrated not just Finn's growing capability for cruelty, but also his understanding of the human psyche. He had learned that fear could be orchestrated without leaving evidence, that appearances could deceive, and that the right combination of patience, observation, and manipulation could grant him almost total control. The disappearance of the shopkeeper was not just a crime, it was a statement, a demonstration of the power that Finn now wielded silently, and a warning that the darkness within him was growing stronger with each passing day. As the weeks passed after the disappearance of the shopkeeper, the local authorities began to sense that something unusual was happening in the town. Minor incidents, lost pets, strange break-ins, and unexplained thefts started forming a pattern that was difficult to ignore. Investigators noted the precision of these acts and the lack of evidence linking them to any outsider. Each case seemed calculated, almost rehearsed, as if the person responsible knew exactly how to avoid detection. Slowly, an unsettling thought began to creep into the minds of the police. Perhaps the disturbances were not random at all. Unbeknownst to them, Finn Henry had been observing every step of the investigation with meticulous care. He kept detailed notes on police movements, witness statements, and news reports. Every assumption the authorities made, every lead they followed, was documented and analyzed. Finn's ability to anticipate human behavior gave him a chilling advantage. He understood that fear, suspicion, and distraction could be manipulated to protect him from discovery. Even as detectives questioned neighbors and examined crime scenes, Finn stayed one step ahead, blending into his environment as the charming, obedient teenager everyone believed him to be. As the investigation progressed, certain patterns began to emerge. The authorities noticed similarities in the timing and method of the incidents. Each event occurred when the streets were quiet, when few people were around, and when witnesses were unlikely to notice anything unusual. There was a subtle cruelty in the way the acts were carried out, careful enough to avoid suspicion, but designed to create fear and anxiety among the victims and their families. Though no one had yet considered Finn as a suspect, the meticulousness of these crimes suggested a mind capable of calculated, deliberate action. Authorities struggled to find connections, chasing leads that went nowhere while Finn quietly expanded his activities. His understanding of human psychology became increasingly apparent through the small but deliberate choices he made. He knew when to act, when to retreat, and how to manipulate the perception of those around him. Even the police, experienced in solving complex cases, found themselves frustrated by the lack of evidence. Finn's ability to remain invisible while orchestrating events was unmatched, a testament to his growing skill as a manipulator. While investigators were baffled, the town grew anxious. Residents became suspicious of strangers and even of neighbors, unsure who could be responsible for the escalating series of disturbances. Finn watched this fear with quiet fascination, documenting every reaction, every whispered conversation, and every sign of mistrust. Each observation reinforced his belief in the power he wielded from behind the scenes. He was not merely a participant in these events. He was the invisible hand guiding them, shaping the town's collective anxiety without ever being suspected. By this time, Finn's obsession had grown to consume almost every waking moment. He spent hours planning, analyzing, and testing scenarios in his mind, refining methods that could evade detection and amplify fear. The investigation had unintentionally become part of his game, a puzzle that he controlled without anyone realizing it. Every step taken by the authorities only deepened his sense of superiority, confirming that he was not just clever, he was untouchable. The town and its law enforcement had no idea that the person they trusted, the polite, intelligent boy they all admired, was the very mastermind orchestrating the events that had left them unsettled and afraid. Finn Henry's crimes had grown bolder, more complex, and far more dangerous than anyone in the town could have imagined. The earlier incidents, minor though they were in comparison, had been practice away for him to perfect his methods of manipulation, observation, and concealment. By the time he set his sights on a wealthy local family, Finn's mind had evolved into something frighteningly precise. He no longer needed to experiment or plan cautiously. He had learned the rhythms of human behavior, the weaknesses of those around him, and the limits of suspicion. Every move was calculated, every decision deliberate, and every step carefully concealed beneath the mask of a polite, intelligent young man. The family he chose was respected and well known in the town, with a home that was both prominent and secluded enough for his plans to unfold without interference. Finn had spent weeks, possibly months, observing them, noting schedules, habits, and patterns of behavior. He knew exactly when the parents were at work, when the children left for school, and when the property was most vulnerable. Unlike his earlier acts, which were designed to provoke fear on a smaller scale, this was a meticulously executed plan aimed at complete control over the situation. Every detail mattered: the timing of his approach, the placement of objects, the manipulation of locks and alarms. When the act was carried out, it was flawless. There were no signs of forced entry, no witnesses, no evidence left behind. The family simply vanished as if swallowed by the earth. The town was thrown into panic, local authorities scrambling for answers, and speculation ran rampant. Strangers, itinerant workers, and even distant relatives were questioned, yet the true perpetrator remained invisible. Finn's meticulous preparation had allowed him to control the narrative without ever revealing himself. His calm demeanor, coupled with his previous reputation as the polite and intelligent son of a respected family, ensured that no one even considered him a suspect. While the town and investigators searched for answers, Finn observed every reaction with clinical detachment. The fear, confusion, and frustration of the community became a source of fascination for him. He documented each news article, each conversation, each police report in his secret notebooks. It was not enough for him to commit the act. He wanted to understand the psychological impact, the ripple effect of his manipulations. Each observation reinforced the sense of power that had been growing within him since childhood, confirming that his control over events was nearly absolute. When authorities began to notice subtle inconsistencies in the case, they were too late. Finn had already moved on, leaving no trace, no fingerprints, no DNA. His ability to remain unseen and unsuspicious had reached its peak. The twist that would shock everyone came later, when forensic experts discovered evidence, carefully disguised but ultimately traceable, that pointed to someone close to the family. The revelation was staggering. The boy everyone trusted, admired, and considered innocent was, in fact, the mastermind behind one of the most chilling disappearances in the town's history. This final act was not only a demonstration of Finn's growing cruelty, but also the ultimate revelation of the man behind the mask. He had evolved from a curious, isolated teenager into a master manipulator, capable of committing horrific acts while maintaining the facade of normalcy. The town was left shaken, the authorities bewildered, and the story of Finn Henry became a dark reminder that appearances can be deceiving. The boy everyone believed they knew was gone, replaced by a calculated predator who had long hidden his true nature behind a mask of charm and obedience, leaving a legacy of terror that would never be forgotten. The trial of Finn Henry gripped the nation, drawing attention from every corner of the United Kingdom. What had once been a quiet, unremarkable town was now the center of a shocking story that revealed a darkness few could comprehend. From the moment he was taken into custody, it became clear that Finn was unlike any criminal the authorities had encountered before. Calm, composed, and eerily polite, he faced the proceedings with the same meticulous control that had characterized every aspect of his secret life. While the courtroom buzzed with tension, the full extent of his crimes slowly began to emerge. Evidence presented during the trial, painted a chilling picture. Not only had Finn orchestrated the disappearance of the local shopkeeper and the wealthy family, but forensic experts and psychologists also uncovered a series of smaller, previously unnoticed acts that demonstrated his manipulative genius. Journals filled with detailed observations, hidden collections of knives and disturbing memorabilia, and photographs of strangers, all meticulously documented, revealed the methodical mind behind his crimes. Each item was a window into his obsession with control, fear, and secrecy. The jury and the public were confronted with a reality that seemed impossible. A boy raised in a respectable family had developed a level of calculated evil that defied understanding. Psychologists testified about the unique nature of Finn's personality. They described him as a master manipulator, capable of hiding his true self while exploiting the weaknesses of those around him. His early fascination with control, combined with his intelligence and charm, had allowed him to avoid detection for years. Experts explained how his ability to appear normal, even virtuous, made him especially dangerous, allowing him to operate undetected while building a psychological grip on the town. For many, it was a revelation that challenged the way they had understood human behavior, trust, and morality. The trial also highlighted the emotional toll on the victims' families and the community. Parents, friends, and neighbors spoke of shock, grief, and disbelief. The sense of betrayal was almost unbearable. The boy they had trusted, admired, and even loved was the very person responsible for unimaginable suffering. Media coverage captured every moment, broadcasting images of Finn calmly walking into the courtroom, his expression unreadable, while families struggled to comprehend the reality of his actions. The town's sense of security, once taken for granted, had been shattered, replaced by fear and suspicion that lingered long after the trial concluded. When the verdict was finally delivered, Finn Henry was sentenced to life imprisonment without the possibility of parole. The courtroom was silent, the gravity of the decision sinking in. For the public, it was a moment of closure, but for historians, psychologists, and criminologists, it became a case study in the nature of hidden evil. Finn's life served as a stark reminder that appearances can be deceiving, that darkness can lurk beneath the most ordinary facades, and that human behavior is often more complex than it seems. Even behind bars, Finn remained composed, continuing to observe the world with the same cold, calculated curiosity that had defined his life. His story would endure as a chilling testament to the dangers of underestimating what lies beneath the surface, a lesson etched into the history of the United Kingdom. The boy, once seen as polite and intelligent, had become a symbol of hidden malevolence, a figure whose actions would haunt the memories of all who had believed they truly knew him. Finn Henry had secured his place in history, not as a child of promise, but as the most evil son the UK had ever known.